Funding for Elwood City Limits is brought to you by Chander Lefave Boughton, Christine Wong, Christopher Ifill, Crescent Fresh, Dan Mike Dawson Silva, Emily K, Froppy, Ian Collis, Joe Sue, John DeLong, John Griswold, Leanne S., Light Relentless, Macy Ball, Riley Stevens, Sam Solero, Stella, and Teresa. Become our patron today and hear your name at the beginning of an Elwood City Limit episode, if I remember to do it, at patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. Thanks, everybody. Coming at you an hour earlier than you expected, or isn't it an hour later? It's Elwood City Limits, the episodic arts podcast. Yeah, I mean, this is, it seems like it's been throwing everybody off this time around. I mean, not that it doesn't usually, but boy, daylight savings times, what a joke. What a joke. What a great prank pulled on us by big time.
Was it Ben Franklin who invented daylight savings time?
Couldn't tell ya.
Thomas Jefferson? Was it Thomas Jefferson?
I feel like I should know, but...
Who invented daylight savings? Now, for all of our Americans who are screaming at their iPods right now, they don't... Ben Franklin. It was Ben Franklin.
All right, there you go. Ben Franklin. Thanks for nothing, pal.
My coworker came up with the big brain daylight savings time strat, which is he went downtown, he went out this Saturday night, and then he just didn't sleep. So while the rest of us were... beguiling the fact that we were losing an hour of sleep. Technically, that just meant he was up an hour less.
Interesting. I mean, man, I don't know. It's a little passe to complain about daylight savings time, and really, I mean, I had yesterday and the day before that off essentially, so it didn't it's not that bad, but at the same time, I feel like now we're getting into the time of year when everything's about to change again. And when's the first day of spring? Is that an April thing?
Oh, geez. I feel like spring comes in March, doesn't it? Late March?
We ask a lot of questions to each other that we end up typing into Google.
As if the ether is just gonna come. I don't know. I feel like spring's close because there was that summer trailer. Did you see that summer trailer?
The what now? What?
The Sommer, the new A24 movie from the person that made Hereditary. They're making a new movie.
Oh, yeah.
That's very May Day,
Sommer
spring.
Something. Ah, man, my mind feels like a piece of garbage right now. Just nothing's firing. So what better time to record a podcast?
Exactly.
My name's Will Young, and I apologize for how much I'll probably be blanking tonight. And the sharper mind of the two of us, I believe that would be Mr. Lucas Mancini.
That's right. I'm like the razor's edge, baby. I just drank a coffee. Just got home from school. Unfortunately, I worked all weekend, so I did feel that loss of an hour. So both of us were sort of running on fumes. Mercury's in retrograde. Its situation is suboptimal, but I wouldn't miss recording the podcast for the world.
Midsommar is the name of it. Ari Aster is the director. Very interested, very excited. Loved Hereditary, and I look forward to this one too. There's a lot of real great sophomore efforts from horror directors coming out. We've got Robert Eggers, who directed The Witch. We've got Jordan Peele's new movie coming out in a week or something.
Whoa! What's the new movie from the guy who made The Witch?
So that was actually one that was filmed near us. It's.
Oh, is that Lighthouse movie?
It's the Lighthouse movie.
With
Robert Pattinson.
Yeah. Okay, interesting.
And there's somebody else that I'm neglecting to
Dafoe.
remember. Yeah, it is called The Lighthouse.
Is there a trailer?
I don't think so, but it is. I believe it is coming out this week. So it was partially filmed in Yarmouth, which is about an hour or two away from us here in the capital of Nova Scotia, Halifax.
Whoa!
It's a very exciting.
Lighthouse upcoming film.
It's a very exciting time to be a horror fan. So if you haven't seen, Get Out, The Witch, Hereditary, and
I'll tell you a real horror film, Will, and that's The Nightly News. Ayo!
All right, thanks, Grandpa.
Have you seen that tweet that guy tweets every time there's like a number one comedy in America? And it's like, they want you to think that, I don't know, what was a recent comedy? Oh gosh, I guess I haven't really watched a lot of comedy movies in theaters.
Overboard.
Yeah. They want you to think that Overboard's the number one comedy in America, but have you seen Congress?
Man, we got a million of them, don't we? We have existential dread, but we also got the puns.
Yeah. Ayo.
All right, so let's try and pull ourselves out of this tailspin. Let's say before we get into this Arthur episode, we talk about a couple of emails we received here at elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, so let's go to our first one here from Kelsey Marie. Postcards from Buster and Arthur theories. I watched an Arthur episode called Lend Me Your Ear, which is about Ratburn not hearing very well due to him playing loud music all the time. That's interesting. I can't wait to get to that one.
I wonder what kind of music that Mr. Ratburn likes. Is he like a big metalhead?
Maybe. That I could.
Does he like screamo?
I could see that swerve coming in. In this particular episode, you can see for a brief second a human version of Mr. Ratburn. It kind of makes me theorize if the Arthur characters are only animals due to Ratburn taking some kind of substance. Interesting. Do you think this could be all in Nigel Ratburn's head?
I wonder why they picked Mr. Ratburn as the one being like the conduit for the audience. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff that happens in this show that Mr. Ratburn is not present for, but that's certainly an interesting... I'll tell you what, you should bring that theory to reddit.com. I'm sure they'd have a field day with it.
As for Postcards from Buster, which I believe we talked about fairly recently, I used to watch it growing up. The only reason I liked it was because you got to see more of Buster's father and the father-son dynamic between Buster and his dad. And in most kids shows that show a single parent, you don't get to see the other parent. I myself come from a divorced family, and my parents split us between each other. I had my mom during the weekends and dad during the week. Well, we will be talking about Postcards from Buster at some point in the future. So hopefully, whatever episode we pick, it'll be a good one. It'll be a good one to kind of show that
dissect.
Dynamic.
Yeah, for sure. Do you know what was? We must have in 91 episodes. We must have mentioned this before. But do you know what's another cartoon that has a really good portrayal of a divorced family?
Are you going to say Stickin Around?
I was going to say Stickin Around. We've definitely said that before, haven't we?
100%. We've talked about Stickin Around like almost as much as Arthur at this point.
Well, I mean, and I'm sure I've shared this anecdote as well on the podcast before, but I when I was a kid, I thought they took place in the same universe because Stanley had the same glasses, or Bradley, Bradley. I called him Little Arthur.
Yes, Little Arthur.
As a child.
I do remember that.
Which doesn't even make that much sense because it's not like... I think Bradley's older than Arthur.
I think they were around the same age, give or take like a year or two. I was thinking, like, I every time I think of Stickin Around, I'd be like, man, love to talk about that. But I don't think it's the kind of thing that you make a podcast about. You know what I think we should do sometime is we should, I'm pretty sure you can find, like, all of the Stickin Around episodes on YouTube. I should, like, have, like, a rabbit... room open and invite in like maybe our Patreon members or something, and like we'll just sit back, kick back for an evening, watch some Stickin Around.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah,
we got to watch the one where they have like the wacky race. What's Dill? Dill's got the lemon car. I feel like that's a seminal Stickin Around episode.
There's a Dill bit that I still laugh at, and it's I think it's an episode involving pets because that's where you find out that Dill has a pet parakeet named Pickle, and just it's Dill and Pickle both basically yelling at each other, just like, keep it down, would ya, Pickle? Keep it down, would ya? And just driving everybody crazy.
Dill is one of those characters where my mom... my mom just hates annoying TV characters. So when I was a kid and I would watch Stickin Around, she hated it because she found Dill really annoying. It's the same with Homestar Runner and Dill are like the Public Enemy number 1 and 2 on my mom's hit list because she couldn't stand either of their voices.
Oh, I've been watching a couple of Strong Bad Emails recently, just some old ones. It's still funny. I love it.
Oh yeah, it's big time. As Moore would say, Homestar Runner is like, it's internet humor that has not aged a lick. It's evergreen. Yeah, it's good stuff.
For sure. We got a quick one here from Norbert Dan. Dear Will, Lucas might not have caught your Erie, Indiana reference in the latest episode, but don't worry, I did. Thank you. Do you think Buster would do well there, or would the weirdness be too much for even him? So, Norbert, I hate to disappoint you on this one. I remembered literally nothing about Erie, Indiana beyond the name. I think I remember watching a few episodes here and there, but even when I was a kid, it kind of felt like a third tier, like there was Goosebumps, there was Are You Afraid of the Dark, and then there was like shows like Erie, Indiana, or the Zack Files.
I don't like any anthology horror show that wasn't produced in Canada, okay? And I think I might have just bumped my microphone because I instinctively slammed on my table. That's how strongly I think about this. If you don't have a young Ryan Gosling in your anthology horror television series, I'm not interested. The one exception is, of course, Tales from the Crypt Keeper, but I've never heard of this show, Will. I'm looking at this Erie, Indiana Wikipedia page. I've never heard of this. This is insane.
Yeah, I don't even know how to describe it. I think it's just like these two kids moved to a town called Erie, Indiana, and weird things happen there, and that's about it.
You ever watch Outer Limits?
No, not really. There's one Outer Limits episode I remember from when I was a kid, and it's like an inventor creates like a robot son or something, and that's about it. The Outer Limits is the 1990s Canadian answer to the Twilight Zone.
That's what I was just gonna say. Is I've only seen the 90s Outer Limits, not the original 60s one.
And finally, we have one from Lion Dog ZXA, who finds it very funny as an American when I pronounce their name as Lion Dog ZXA instead of Z. Well, get used to it, because that's what we do over here. All right, in the mailbag episode a couple weeks ago, you mentioned the idea that Muffy could get more development by taking an interest in the protection of animals or the environment. I'm pleased to say that in a post-season 10 episode, The Cherry Tree, this is brought up. I'm interested to hear Lucas's thoughts on A Boy with His Head in the Clouds, since it deals with dyslexia. More on that later. Also, I need your help with something. A few days ago, I started thinking about what if Arthur was a fighter, it was a Super Smash Bros. Fighter, and what his special moves, smash attacks, final smash, taunts, stage, and series logo would be. So far, I've determined that his neutral special would be kicking a soccer ball, his up special would be using his moon boots, and his smash attacks would be his iconic punch, and the series logo would be his glasses. Do you have any ideas? Lucas, take it away.
Arthur would probably not be dissimilar to like a Villager or an Isabel in the way they move. So his forward B would be like he's got a bunch of books. You know when he's coming out of the library and he's got the books stacked so high that you can't even see his face?
Yeah.
And he'd be like falling forward, dropping the books. Mm-hmm. And so forward B, he'd like drop on the books on you. Or maybe that'd be his forward smash. I don't know.
I love the moon boots as the up B. That's that's a really great recovery move.
Moon boots gots to be the up B. I think, neutral B, he could also, like, eat you like Kirby with his big, like, cake face.
I like the smash attack being, like, very punch-heavy. I think that's a really good reference. You could also do, like, you could almost have him like a Nest-type character. You could have him use a baseball bat since he plays baseball.
Mm-hmm. Though I do think it's got to be the punch, you're right. Mm-hmm. I think, like, his final smash could be, like, he gets cut by the lima bean can, and then, like, all the, like, germs, like, stampede the stage.
I gotta say for his final smash, I think he's got to call in Pal.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
either Pal or DW. No, DW.
Yeah, DW with like pots and pans, like walking by, like
DW is the Smash Trophy. Sorry.
Oh yeah, like Kawasaki. Yeah, I guess that's all of it.
Taunts? Any taunts?
Any taunts? I don't know. Taunts is difficult. Arthur's not really a boastful guy.
His level could be the treehouse,
or
the sugar bowl.
His final smash actually probably would be like Captain Wario, where he turns into Bugs Bunny or something. Bionic Bunny.
Bionic Bunny.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I think there's fertile ground here, I think that. Lion Dog ZXA has got us down the right path here. So, good question. I like that one. I finally got to play the new Smash recently.
Oh yeah, what did you think? I've been sorry. Let me get next to the microphone. What did you think? I really enjoyed that game. I love that game actually.
I liked it a lot. It's just kind of, the Smash I've come to expect. I didn't try out too many new characters. I was kind of seeing how my old ones were, and pretty good so far, the translation. I mean, the only thing that's not good is I recently realized that when it comes to Super Smash Brothers, I am the equivalent of a wrestler who was very good in ECW coming to the WWE, and I realized I'm no good without weapons.
That's hilarious.
I'm like the Sandman of Super Smash Bros. It's just it doesn't translate, unfortunately. Like, if you 1v1 me, no items, you will kill me. But if there are items, I at least have a chance of like accidentally killing someone. I'm not very good at that game anymore. I'm too old, but it was still a lot of fun. I loved the 5-on-5, the where it's like each is a different character. I think that's a great idea.
No, I love that game. I would never go as far as to say as I'm good at it. I mean, I can kind of play Pikachu, I would say, and I certainly can't play anybody else. But I do like a lot of the new characters. Like, you should try Inkling or the Castlevania guys like Simon and Richter. Those are all very fun.
I should. All right, everybody, thank you for your emails over at elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com. One of those emails was talking about the first Arthur story that we'll be talking about here today, The Boy with His Head in the Clouds. And this is one that we have been I'd like to think that we have been looking forward to this one for a while now for a couple of reasons. It's a George episode, and we get a lot of characterization of George, one particularly that Lucas, I think you're going to be able to kind of talk about in a greater detail than I would be able to.
Oh yeah, I mean, I didn't really realize it was this episode from the title, but I was excited once I realized what was going on.
So we start off the episode. Arthur is talking about what it would be like if you could see inside people's minds, not their brains, but their minds.
He's climbing up Mr. Rappern's head, and Mr. Rapper he's got like, I don't know if you noticed this, Will, but looking at this now, a pause. It's like a profile view of Mr. Rappern, and it looks exactly like Drake's "Nothing Was the Same" cover.
I didn't notice that.
The clouds and everything.
Oh my god, that's No, I didn't notice that. I'm getting to that point right now. Oh my god, that's wonderful. Yeah, okay, so Arthur's scaling it. You see a lot of like earwax when he goes into people's heads. I'm not a huge fan of it.
Yeah, the animators love, like, whenever we get into stuff like this, like in the Lice episode or any episode where there's like remember like when they showed the inside of Buster's ears, like his putrid ears? They love like animating like ear flesh.
It does look like that album cover. It's weird.
Not DeGeneres, but even Ellen love our shit. You know what I mean? Like,
and I like that album. So
I also like that album. So yeah, Arthur says, what have you ever wondered what it's like in someone's mind? And this is all very inside, like Disney Pixar's Inside.
Yeah, Inside Out.
Inside Out.
So Arthur goes into Ratburn's head and he finds out that it's a giant homework machine where it just basically takes all the thoughts that Ratburn has, all of his experiences, and figures out ways to like put it into this giant homework blender. And there's also like a conveyor belt that takes the fun out of everything in order to make it homework. There's actually a little bit of a disturbing part here. Lucas, you've talked about before how when the scene from Superman 3 where the woman becomes the robot scares you.
Oh my god, yeah.
Arthur gets zapped with like the no fun ray and he essentially becomes a robot. Like he just immediately loses all emotion, just goes, I am educational. And then he decides to hop into George's head. Sorry, I should finish that. Ratburn says, it's like, and for your homework tonight, I want you to write an essay on Arthur. And everybody's like, huh? And he's like, why did I say Arthur?
He says, no more double lattes for me.
Yeah. So Arthur decides to hop into George's mind, which is much different. It's actually like this giant screen with a bunch of like images on it, moving images and static images. But then like a word comes up and the mind doesn't know how to handle it. And then it begins to like go into shutdown mode. And Arthur's like, it's just a word.
These images are full motion video. Like, I can't stress that enough, that they're not animated. It's like live action footage. And the way it's like cutting between them and flashing between them. And I feel like this is not the first time I've made this reference either. But you know the episode of Lost where they find the mind control room?
I'm sure I've seen
season
it.
3. It's where the other people live. It's like an old Darwin facility. Spoilers for Lost if you haven't seen Lost. And they find this mind control room and it's just like flashing a bunch of images. God, what is it called? Just a second. It's one of my favorite lore things in Lost is the mind control.
I don't remember a mind control room, but it's
very Clockwork Orange room.
It's been a long time. It's been a long time since I've seen Lost. So yeah,
Room 23, a brainwashing technique.
The
Lost Wikia.
George's mind can't handle a single word, and we will soon find out why. It is indeed a George episode. Pretty much everything is from his perspective. In class, they're trying to do like a word problem that Ratburn is reading out to them. It's one of those really elongated word problems that go on forever. And George kind of loses his concentration and ends up daydreaming. He has this daydream about like how he gets on a jetpack and flies up into the clouds, and he makes friends with these birds. And but eventually he gets pulled out of it. So this is kind of the first inkling of not necessarily like, or rather I should say, of kind of how George's mind works. He's not so much for, facts and figures and like kind of statistical analytical thinking. He's much more of a dreamer and
a creative type, yeah.
A creative type, yeah. And it reminded me, like, I definitely did that a couple times when I was in elementary school, like just kind of. My mind wandered, and then the teacher was like, "William, are you listening?" I'm like, "Huh? No, sorry." I
did that today. I that is just a reality. That's every single day of my life in school right now.
And yeah, I mean, I feel like that would probably still happen to me too. George,
except no ravens are asking me if I'm eating lutefisk.
Yeah, lutefisk for lunch. Again, kind of a shout out to his heritage.
What is lutefisk? Oh,
lutefisk is like a type of fish, I think, or like
Central Norway. We're learning all kinds of stuff today.
Well, remember in Arthur's Perfect Christmas, like there was a representation of Norway because that's where George's family history is from. So they were doing like Norwegian holiday celebrations here.
Is there moose in Norway? Are they indigenous? Is that what the connection is? 'Cause it's kind of I don't think I know anybody from Norway.
No, I can't say that.
Norway. Okay, so when you Google Norway moose, the very thing that comes up is an article called "Norway builds world's largest moose statue. Canada strikes back." So Norway must be known for.
Yeah, so there's something there, and that's cool. I like that, and it's a cultural signifier that you wouldn't necessarily see from a backup character like George. We go to George's house, and we pretty much see right away, like, he is trying to read a book passage on Leonardo da Vinci, but he's trying to sound it out, and it just isn't working. And we might as well kind of get into it a little bit right now. So throughout the episode, we eventually find out that George has dyslexia. And Lucas, not to blow up your spot or anything, but you also have dyslexia.
That's right. So I have a mild case of dyslexia. I was diagnosed with it. I was a little bit older than George. I would have probably been around junior high. So dyslexia affects people in different ways, and there's different levels of severity. So George's seems to affect his reading comprehension, which is not something that I've ever really experienced. So specifically, when my dyslexia is my writing. So Like I can read fine, but let's say the word, this is my go-to example, is always like the word bed. Sometimes if I'm writing quickly and I'm unfocused, I would just write the word bed as Deb unconsciously.
Right.
And I often put O's and U's in the wrong spot, and spelling does not come naturally to me. And so that's pretty much my dyslexia, as well as like some of the more ADD elements that George seems to exempt in this episode, like the me personally, to be able to focus on anything, I kind of have to be doing two things at once. So if I'm in a group meeting, I kind of have to be like checking Twitter to be able to focus at all. Otherwise my mind will just wander and I won't focus on anything instead of focusing on two things. But yeah, so mostly it's funny. Even though George's dyslexia is different than my own, I do think this episode reflects my experience pretty well. Like from people, well, I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but I will say it's kind of uncanny how close this is to reality. Someone on the writing staff must have or had a child who was diagnosed with dyslexia, because some of this stuff is very close to how it works in reality.
You'll have to let us know exactly like some of these other connections as we go through the episode. But it's we get a scene here with George and his dad where he says, hey, Dad, I need help with this reading. And his dad is working on like some sort of like he's working on like a cage or something, and George ends up kind of like not paying not so much not paying attention, but he gives the book to his dad. His dad like walks off screen, and then he kind of spends a couple of minutes making his own little like pulley contraption. So he's very like his creativity comes out in kind of more physical, kind of creative. I don't know what I'm trying to say here. He's very good at making things. He's very good with his hands. And it seems that his dad is too, so that's probably where he gets it from. But when his dad is like, okay, what do you need help with, son? And he's like, well, first, what's it about? And his dad's like, oh. But this is kind of where I had the question, and I don't know if you'll be able to kind of even answer this, Lucas, but I was wondering, like, it's kind of a later in the episode thing where it's like George, like Ratburn essentially diagnoses George with dyslexia. I find it very strange that, like, his family never kind of encountered this or like had this diagnosed, I guess. And
well, I don't want to make too many assumptions, but sure. George's dad seems like a real salt of the earth gentleman. He's working in his tool shed. He seems possibly like a good old boy, and so maybe he just never heard of it.
It could be, and like you said, when you were in junior high, I mean, maybe it just takes a while for like even people close to you to kind of recognize the symptoms or the difficulties, and as we see throughout the episode, it's not easy for George to talk about. There's a scene right here where the Arthur, Buster, and Francine are playing No Guessing in the treehouse, which Arthur wins clean.
Well, okay, so I love that this is a running joke now, is that Arthur's just a cheater. Like, like every time Arthur wins a game, it must be questioned. He's like the Barry Bonds of board games. There's an asterisk next to his name during all victories, which is so funny for like the main character of this children's show, the sort of the character that the audience is supposed to relate to the most, the one that is like, he means well, he's a good friend, he reads, but also he's got a past where he used to cheat all the time, so none of his friends trust him when they play board games. I think that's just a weird character trait.
Well, we've seen 6 seasons of like Arthur's darkest traits, and like he's not a good guy, he's not a bad guy, he's the guy. That's all there's to it. He's just a normal kid. He's got ups and he's got downs.
Nobody's nerfect.
Yeah, so they invite George to play, and he's kind of he says, I'm not very good at trivia games, and like they encourage him to play. George tries to read a clue, but he just can't, and this kind of backs up the whole thing of like he probably didn't want to tell anybody about it, because I imagine for some kids it's embarrassing, because Francine asks him like, George, can you read? And then George is like, of course I can read. This game is stupid. And he just like storms out. I will say this is how I know from memory that Oslo is the capital of Norway. I always remembered in George's voice. Oslo. The capital of Norway is Oslo.
I only know it from that Netflix video that's like a trip through Oslo. That's like the train. It's like just like 10 hours of a train driving through the mountains of Oslo.
Oh, that sounds peaceful.
Oh, it's amazing. But I will also say, For some reason, this reminds me of the Seinfeld episode where George plays Trivial Pursuit against the Bubble Boy, and
Moops.
Sorry, that's the Moops. And then the Bubble Boy's bubble deflates.
Yeah.
Just in terms of like misreading trivia cards.
So we and I kind of already said this before. The next scene is George takes his ventriloquist dummy Wally out of storage and kind of talks to him for a little bit. And it's not in your face, but throughout the episode, we do see like all the things that George is good at. He's good at building things. He's good at ventriloquism. Like, he's got all of these strengths that he just can't really focus on because he is focusing on his weakness, which is his dyslexia. But it's, you know, if you're kind of reading between the lines of the episode, George is a very intelligent, thoughtful, creative kid. It's just he has this one stumbling block.
What's interesting about this is prior to this, Wally has just kind of been an extension of George, but now I feel like Wally's got a consciousness unto himself. Like, when George is like, Wally gives George advice, and then George puts Wally back in the box, and he's like, no, don't put me back in the box!
Yeah, George...
It's like, Wally's more like a Nadine or something, where he's kind of his own character now.
George really commits to the bit, and there is a throwaway line about how, like, George got Wally back from DW of just like, you know, it's like, it took me weeks to wash that lipstick off my face.
Yeah, they retconned Wally to get him back to George.
Mm-hmm. So in talking to Wally, George decides that, you know, he needs to kind of take on a new identity so no one will know that he can't read. And through Wally, he figures that he should be like Binky, because even though Binky's not terribly smart, everybody respects him because they fear him. So he needs to become a mean kid. And so we get this extended sequence where George is essentially hiring Binky's services in order to teach him how to be a bully.
So first thing I noticed, did you know both George and Binky are wearing orange button-downs?
So they are.
Shop at the same clothing store, so it was meant to be. But this is a really unique pairing. You know, we've talked about this before. I always love when two characters that we don't normally see hang out. And George and Binky is an inspired combo.
It's an odd couple, that's for sure, because Binky is trying to go through all of these, essentially this tutoring lesson of just like of bullying 101, just like making threats, looking intimidating. But George really can't. He's a quiet and nice kid. So being mean and intimidating doesn't come to him naturally. And it leads to kind of the crux of this entire sequence is how Binky's like, we need to find a way to kind of make you more physically imposing. And then George has an idea, and it leads to this music video sequence called Hammer.
Who's the moose that's on the loose? Hammer. Hammer. 5 feet tall from horns to caboose. Hammer. Hammer.
He's tough as nails. He's real bad. He's never sad. Hammer. Don't mess with him.
So, yeah, Binky calls George Hammer because he's like, you like building stuff?
Yeah.
And he sees George's hammer, and he's like, that would be a good name. And then he kind of gives George this whole makeover. And then, of all things, this was something I was really surprised to see.
Mm-hmm.
We get a Shaft parody.
Yeah.
Which is like, this is one for the adults, but I'm like, what adults? Like, you have to be a very particular type of person to know what this is referencing, and it is like referencing it hard back to like the ad libs of like the girls being like hammer, like just like the Shaft, and then it's like the deep voice of like, he's coming, here's the mean streets, it's Hammer's at it again, hammer, like this is amazing, this is like incredible.
He's bad. He's never sad.
Yeah, it's so good.
And did you catch this? The Spike Lee reference that they made, because on George's antlers, on one of them he writes hate, and then one of them he writes love.
I did see this. That's crazy. Like, do the right thing.
Yeah, I loved that.
Also, George is wearing like Bret Hart glasses. There's very little to not love about this whole sequence.
This is another great Arthur Halloween costume because you need to get a yellow shirt that you like smock up with like paint. You need antlers, you need the red bandana and the sunglasses, and you also need to wear like wooden crates on your feet. But he looks cool. I love this look.
Yeah, this is very cool. And then we get this like great fisheye effect as he's walking down the street. This whole sequence is great. Before we move on, during George's training, Binky's got like a list of things to teach him, and they are insults, pushing, and rude noises. What do you think rude noises are? You think just like farting or like
armpit farts,
raspberries? Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so we get George is now a part of the tough customers. It was interesting to see with his little stilts, George is as tall as Binky, and a poor little girl walks by. And George like tries to intimidate her, but he steps in a bucket and falls on his face.
Grr, what are you looking at, Foodus?
Thus is the end of Hammer.
Anyway, great little aside. I thought that added a lot of character to this.
The fact that they recorded an original soul song for it is just beyond the pale.
It's great. So yeah, Binky admits defeat, that there's no way that he can make George kind of intimidating. There's no way that he can make him a bully. And so George is kind of back to square one. At this point in the episode, we see that everybody has to do a report on Leonardo da Vinci. And then after class, Ratburn calls George aside. And this is kind of where he says, have you ever been tested for dyslexia? And essentially this is where he gets pretty much diagnosed. And we also find out that canonically, Mr. Haney has dyslexia too. He wanders into the class, and Ratburn makes an illusion of just like, in fact, you're not the only one in the school with it. Mr. Haney comes in, and he's like, oh, I thought this was the teacher's lounge. Well, can't tell my left from my right. And George is like, yeah, me neither.
Now this part, I was a little bit like, all the goodwill they did, portraying dyslexia realistically with George and making him sympathetic, it's all washed away because Mr. Haney's just an idiot. Mr. Haney's just a fool. No, but I'm mostly joking. I thought it was funny, especially like, and then you see this montage of sort of Mr. Haney and George hanging out, and then so this part where the lady's holding up the giant like letter flashcards. This was crazy. I was like, oh my god, because I've definitely done the same thing where like I had after school classes I had to take, and I had like a dyslexia tutors, and they would hold up these giant flashcards. And like for instance, the Ben and Deb example, you would remember that like Will has a bump and D has a duff, and that's how you remember the difference between B and D.
Oh, I see.
But these like giant flashcards and like sounding out the noises and all this stuff is like very accurate to real life.
I will also say that Ratburn kind of asked him about if he's ever been tested for dyslexia, because George turned in a writing like a short story, and Ratburn, which Ratburn liked, he just had a lot of trouble reading it. He's like, very, very Edgar Allan Poe. So I thought that was interesting. It's like even in a creative medium that George isn't like terribly good at, like function or style wise, he still has like this very creative mind. Yeah,
it's like reading it looked like if you actually like try and read George's like essay, it's like Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce.
Yeah, the dummy in the closet, it's called.
Yeah, the dummy in the closet. I'm trying to look up one of those like made up words from Finnegan's Wake.
Yeah, just like incomprehensible, or like trying to read somebody talking in Cockney in like one of the Harry Potter books. There's so many apostrophes and shortened words. Yeah.
Did you see that? Like, everybody's making those jokes about the new. Did you see the trailer for the new Pokemon game, Pokemon Sword and Pokemon Shield? It's taking place in the fake UK, so it's like, oh, the Pikachu on round the lorry.
Do I look like an auxiliary, mate? Yeah, yeah, those are great. I love the tweets that are done in like written out Scottish dialect. It's so great.
Well, if you've never looked up these 100-letter words from Finnegan's Wake, I highly recommend you do. Because there's like no way that James Joyce wasn't just pulling a fast one. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, this is so stupid. Like, I hope I become a literary legend. Like, I hope I someday am widely regarded as one of the greatest writers of the 20th century, so I could just put out absolute nonsense and have people pretend it's like smart. Because that's definitely what this is. This is so stupid. Like,
To take a
It's
page
like
out.
his cat walked across his keyboard, and they were like, "Oh, it's genius, dream logic."
To take a page out of our friends from Dog Island's book, it's the ultimate grift.
Yeah, oh, definitely. James Joyce, definitely a grifter, certified.
So we get to what is the end of the episode. Everybody's passing in their reports. We hear a couple of the titles, like Muffy's is great. I love this. The Medicis, From Riches to Riches.
That was very good. And then Buster's is good as well. It's like, who really painted the Sistine Chapel? Was it
Da Vinci or aliens or something like that? And it seems like George doesn't have a report. In fact, he says he doesn't have one. But instead of doing a report, he actually got help from his dad and created a prototype of a Da Vinci flying machine from like one of his like schematics. And like it actually works. It's basically like a car seat that they found at the dump on like a wooden pallet. And then he also created these like not functional, but like these wings that are controlled with like joysticks, and it looks cool. And George gets like a brief little imagination sequence where like he flaps the wings and he starts to fly, and the episode ends with Ratburn giving him an A. So again, the message kind of being sent here of like George may not excel in one area, but that doesn't mean that he's not creative, he's not intelligent. He just needs to channel his strengths into different avenues, and that's true for a lot of kids. And I would hope that, you know, kids watching this like yourself who have dyslexia or have other learning disabilities kind of came away with a kind of positive takeaway from all this.
No, yeah, like when Mr. Rappard's diagnosing George with dyslexia, and he's saying like, oh, all these people have dyslexia, like Mr. Haney,
Albert Einstein,
Leonardo da Vinci. It was very similar, except they were like at the learning center when I was getting after school taught, they had like a list of all the people with dyslexia, like all the famous people. You know, Tom Cruise has dyslexia.
Mm-hmm. And that's pretty much the end of that episode. Welcome George to the extended Arthur canon. I think we'll be seeing him a bit more from now on, or at least I certainly hope so. I liked our time with him. And now, a word from us, kids. Hi there, Elwood City Limits listener. Just a quick note here from your buddy, your pal, Will Young, that this show is supported by all of you, listeners just like you, by the following ways. Facebook.com/Elwood City Limits, Twitter @ECL Podcast, Tumblr, ElwoodCityLimits.tumblr.com, and Instagram @Elwood City Limits. Drop us a line on social media. We'd love to hear from you, and give us a like, a heart, whatever it is. Email elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com. You can get your email read here on the air. Just send it to us and let us know what you think of the episode, of the show, of anything in particular that we might have talked about or that's on your mind. And you can find the podcast by going to elwoodcitylimits.libsyn.com, and you can find it at your local podcast provider. Now, if the show is not on a service that you use all the time and you'd like to change that, make sure to drop us a line and we will get it on there as soon as possible. All right, let's get back to the episode now, already in progress. And we're back. All right, so we 2 in a row here. It's another DW episode as we're talking about more. It's like I only just realized it before we recorded here, but it was like, yeah, DW is getting the major focus here in the mid to late part of season 6.
Mm-hmm. I think all these memories I have of a kid of all these like DW focused episodes and Emily and the Tibbles, because there's in my mind there's such an established part of the Arthur canon, but their episodes were pretty sparse in the first couple seasons. You know, we'd have the one where she made up the story as she went along, or we had the ones where she hung out with the Tibbles for a while. But this whole like episodes that just take place in the preschool, I think they're getting more frequent.
Mm-hmm. So this one starts out with DW being obsessed with things being equal, just like a little kid. I feel like a lot of little kids go through this phase. Like she's taking off, like making sure hers and Arthur's cake slices had the exact amount of frosting, and she's especially obsessed when it comes to her friend Emily to make sure that they're equal too. So we get a bit more of this is actually a little bit of fleshing out for Emily. So she's not like rich, but she's definitely like pretty well off, and DW, but she also like she doesn't flaunt it, at least not in this episode very much.
The 1% have the French nannies. Well, we gotta make it so every little girl has a French nanny. The 99% are not getting a French nanny, Will.
Who is this?
Oh, God. It's like a very bad Bernie Sanders. Oh, oh no. Not only was that unfunny, but it hurt me. It's double bad. Oh, jeez. Oh.
Man, you really paid for that one. So there's a thing here where like DW like sees a music box that Emily has, and she's like, "Oh, mine just plays Mairzy Doats." And for a long time, I didn't know what that was.
But still don't.
But now, whenever I hear Mairzy Doats, I can't not think of Leland Palmer from Twin Peaks.
What is Mairzy Doats?
Mairzy Doats and Doatsy Doats and Little Lambsy Divey and Kiddly Divey too, wouldn't you? It's
my goodness.
Leland Palmer sings that so much in the second season. Then there's like literally a point where he's explaining how like what it means, and that's how I know what Mairzy Doats is and what it means.
Oh, Mairzy Doats and Dozy Doats and Little Lambsy Divey, a Kiddly Divey too, wouldn't you? Oh, Mairzy Doats and Dozy Doats and Little Lambsy Divey, a Kiddly Divey too, wouldn't you? Now if the words sound queer and funny to your ear, a little bit jumbled and jivey, say mares eat oats and does eat oats and little lambs eat ivy.
Leland.
Oh, Mairzy Doats and Dozy Doats and Little Lambs eat ivy, a Kiddly Divey too, wouldn't you? A Kiddly Divey too, wouldn't you? A Kiddly Divey too, wouldn't you?
Oh, jeez. That's like my equivalent of that is like the Rattlin Bog.
What's that?
Will, you don't know about the Rattlin Bog? The tree in the hole in the ground? The bog down in the valley?
It sounds kind of familiar.
There was a rare branch, a Rattlin branch on a tree in the hole in the ground, the bog down in the valley? Eventually, they get so into detail, like they get microscopic. It's like a gnat on a hair, on a feather, on the feather, on the bird, and the bird in the egg, and the egg in the nest, and the nest in the branch of the tree, and the tree in the bog down in the valley. And they get faster every time.
This sounds familiar. Like, I'm sure if I haven't heard this exact one, I've heard like a variation of it. Like, definitely that kind of thing.
And then they say they get faster. They're like faster buys. The buys got to do it. They got to do it doubly fast.
Is it a Newfoundland thing?
Oh, big time.
You said buys, and I'm like, all right, I know what's going on here. But the thing that kind of sets DW off here is like, you know, she's just like making sure that everything is equal. Just like, oh, so like if you like my Mairzy Doats one and I like yours, then we're equal. But I guess mine's also better. And Emily's like, can we just play now? Which is the theme of the episode. And then we get another appearance here from Mairzy Doats. She comes in, and DW is very jealous that Emily has a French nanny, but she doesn't. And she's like, I'm beginning to really like the little time we spend with Mairzy Doats because of her accent alone. She's just like, look at this place, it is a mess. I will clean it later.
It's almost like a South Park character doing a French accent. It's like that level of like.
It's not quite full parody, but it is exaggerated to a point that I find it very funny. And then she just starts singing Frère Jacques because, of course, she does.
We were talking about Hereditary earlier. Did you notice that Emily's like room with the dollhouse? It just kind of reminded me of Hereditary, like the workshop in Hereditary.
I can't say it didn't ring a bell for me in that sense, but good looking out.
Also, if you pause it when they're going at the dollhouse, you can see this stuffed hippo, and he's just got a good face. You should check out this stuffed hippo that Emily has. I'm a big fan of his face. Look at this. Oh my goodness gracious. He's like, ugh.
Oh, he does. It's a real.
The hippo's having a good time.
He sure is. I'll have to get a snap of that. So DW is in a very bad mood for like the next little while here because she feels like she deserves a French nanny. So she begins to draft a proposal to her parents as to why she should have one.
Oh, this is amazing. So, given my current studies in public relations and drafting press releases and media kits and strategic communications plans. I know we're always pontificating about what job DW would be good at in adulthood. I think there's numerous ones we've talked about. But DW's like, brainstorming session with Nadine here about drafting this letter to her parents is like incredibly public relations-esque. Like when she's talking about the original first reason is like, Mommy and Daddy, you guys don't spend enough time with me because you're too busy with work. And the DW is like, I thought we scrapped that. And she's like, oh yeah, right. It's like, you guys deserve a break. Why don't you? And that is so like PR. Like that reminded me so much of the stuff we're learning in class,
right?
About, like how to deliver information in a way that like, I don't know. I was like, oh, DW should take what I'm taking in college right now.
There's another great line that I liked, and it's DW saying, I'm very dainty and need someone to protect me from Arthur, who is crazy and mean. Very good. So she takes this proposal to the family at dinner, but they actually intercept her with an announcement of their own concerning DW, and like she immediately gets like the crazy she gets like the spiral eyes, and she's like spiraling downwards because she is just imagining that they're gonna give her a French nanny, and her French nanny in her imagination like bursts through the door, and just like it's actually a different accent than Mairzy Hélène, and it's just like it's kind of just more your standard like French accent of just like, Mademoiselle DW, I am yours to command, and it actually kind of looks like Polly Lockett. I found.
I did find it looked like Polly Lockett. I wish DW would get like a French Canadian nanny, like a nanny on a budget. So she's like, oh, DW, I do not know. I'm just from Shawinigan. We got the putin. We got the putin, DW.
DW, we gotta leave. I gotta take you down to the dépanneur to get some Saint Hubert. or maybe speaks English like Kevin Owens or Sami Zayn.
Oh yeah, the title, DW. I need to get the title. Oh my goodness, great! The dépanneur. Woo!
That's I have to give credit to our friend of the show, John DeLong. He and one of the guys at my wedding party, Luke, really perfected that Quebecer accent, and I just think it's hilarious. And that was some of their go-to words, dépanneur and Saint Hubert. But actually, it's not. She's not getting a French nanny. She's getting an allowance. So every week she's going to get 75 cents, which to me is a really weird denomination. For me, like, just to keep it simple, I would have either gone it to 50 or pushed it to the full dollar. 75 cents seems like a really kind of strange midpoint.
Did you ever have an allowance, Will?
I sure did. So my first allowance would have probably been when I was around Arthur's age. I want to say like 8 or 9. My first allowance was a loonie, and which increased to a toonie, and I believe at the most my allowance was $5 a week.
Ooh, big baller. I never had an allowance.
Really? That's interesting.
No, I had to make that birthday money and that Christmas money work. But yeah, I never had an allowance. I just had to do chores because I had to.
Well, it's a part of life that you forget is a part of your life. Like that was literally how I used to get like any type of money, and it's something that I had not thought about until we got into this episode, which is all about allowances. So DW sees this as like the ultimate flex, and she can't wait.
Yeah, there's a lot of DW flexing in this episode.
So she daydreams about taking it to the playground, like opening up a backpack full of money, and just like it's called an allowance. And Emily doesn't have that. In fact, Mairzy Hélène is just like, oh, you do not have such things. Mademoiselle Emily has such nice things, but this she does not have. She's like, she sounds like John Renault sometimes. This furthers the fantasy of like her again flexing with that money. She like basically buys an entire toy store and gives half of it to Emily, and like kind of wins her magnanimous praise. But instead of it going quite that way, DW brings her allowance to the playground, shows it to Emily, and Emily's like, oh yeah, I started getting an allowance last year, which to me is wild, of just like, what do 3 and 4-year-olds need with like an allowance, need with money at all?
I don't know. There's lots of stuff 4-year-olds. I wanted stuff when I was 4.
Yeah, I just don't know if it's like the right time to be teaching them like the value of money in this degree. Like I got my
in this economy, never too early to start saving. Like when we get to later on and how the Tibbles have like a bank account, I'm like, damn, the Tibbles grandma's responsible. Those Tibbles got their college fund ready.
Well, that's actually in this scene too. Like DW asks them, "Do you guys have an allowance?" And then one of them just goes, "Timmy, show her the book."
Okay, so this part's great. Not only do the Tibbles have a checkbook.
Yeah, and they have a bank account which is apparently just gains an interest every month. So much like last episode when we found out they take music lessons and all this kind of stuff. The Tibbles are very well looked after, despite how savage they are to each other.
Do you know how to balance a checkbook, Will? I feel like having...
No.
Okay. I'm glad I wasn't the only one where, when the Tibbles took out this book, I was like, for a second I had to, squint. I was like, wait a minute. What is this?
Do people still even do that? What?
Well, no, the whole point was you weren't able to check your balance unless you were at the bank because we didn't have cell phones. And so you would have to keep track of your purchases to make sure you didn't, you knew how much money was in your account, so you had to do the math yourself, right? I think that's how a checkbook works.
Ask your mom and dad how balancing a checkbook works, because now we're spoiled. We get to go on to our bank account client online and just make transfers and purchases in an instant.
I remember when you had to call the bank on your T9 phone and the robo voice would tell you how much was in your account.
Yeah, I think I did that a couple times.
But yeah, I don't think, even though I was a kid, I would have been the Tibbles age around the same time, right? In the early 90s. Yeah. And I didn't know any kid with a checkbook.
No way. Especially trusting the Tibbles to carry around their checkbook, please.
They seem pretty responsible with it, though.
Yeah.
You'd see records of all their purchases and stuff like that.
They must have learned that. So DW realizes that she's actually kind of behind the game, so she needs to step it up. So she actually comes to her parents with a long strip of paper that has nonsense on it. It just goes, "It's called a bill." And just basically for imaginary services rendered for her family. There's a great shot here of it's just mom and dad's face as they kind of regard her as DW is talking about what they owe her for, and their faces just very slowly get angrier and angrier as she keeps talking. It's such a great little piece of animation. They don't yell at her, they don't do anything, but they are very not happy with this behavior, and they send her to her room, and she's in tears because she's I didn't even complain about not having a French nanny, even though I'm supposed to have one.
But you know what? This is interesting because we talk a lot about how Arthur deals with wealth inequality and how Buster, Francine, Arthur, they all have completely different living situations. And so it's interesting, from a child's perspective, DW doesn't understand why Emily might have a French nanny and why her parents won't just give her a French nanny. Because, as a kid, you have no sort of concept of money or I remember I didn't understand that parents I just thought they had infinite money when I was a little kid, or
Sure.
Another little kid would little kids don't have a good sense of their situation, or they think so it makes sense as annoying as DW's being in this moment, which don't get me wrong, and I'm usually one with a lot of patience for DW. I know she's got her haters out there. But as annoying as DW is being, and she is being annoying, you can understand why she doesn't understand, right? It makes perfect sense for the character, so you can't help but feel a little bit bad for her.
Oh yeah, we've all been at that stage in our lives where it's we want this thing for our birthday, we want this gift, and our parents are like, no, and they don't need to explain anymore because we wouldn't understand anyway, but they're just well, what do you mean no? Everybody else has it, why can't I? And it's just completely beyond our understanding at that point. So it is very true to life. It's just also not very endearing to her character. There's a funny little fantasy sequence that DW has where it's Emily and the Tibbles are in this vault, lying down on money and coloring in their checkbooks.
They're surrounded by safety deposit boxes.
Yeah.
And they're sitting on a giant pile of loose bills.
And DW's can I color with you? And Emily's do you have a bank account book? No. Then what is there for you to color? And slams the door on her. I thought that was good.
Joke's on them. They're trapped in the safe.
So DW tries to go the complete opposite way of being extra responsible and taking on a lot of basically child labor within the house. There's this montage of her cleaning everything and doing all of these chores that she doesn't normally do. And again, she's like 4. So I wouldn't expect her to do any of these things, like cleaning the bathtub. She tries to like wash the dishes, and she breaks so many plates.
Yeah, there's some fun physical comedy in there where like she's trying her best, but like sometimes it's like some of these tasks are above her. Like when she's pouring Arthur's milk, she gets it on his sleeve. She breaks like most of their cutlery, their plates. I mean, she almost vacuums Pal.
Yeah. And so at the end of it, she's like bone tired, and she's just like, okay, now that I've been so responsible, are you going to raise my allowance? And then Mom is immediately not pleased. So that's not going to work. We get a fun sight gag when DW goes back to preschool of her looking around at everybody. She gets like the RoboCop sight, and she's like looking at everybody and imagining what their allowance is. It's like $1, $2, $5, $10, $100, and she looks at Emily, and then the numbers just start spinning because she apparently gets like infinite money.
So Will, this is my new homework for you today. Let me pull this up here. So this sequence, like initially it makes you think of like RoboCop, maybe Terminator, the way she's kind of sizing people up with this robot vision. But it reminded me, I was like, what does this remind me of? Like, I know it's like RoboCop or Terminator, but like there's something that this reminds me of. Are you familiar with the rapper Isaiah Rashad?
I don't think so. So
there's an Isaiah Rashad video called For de Squaw. Let me see if I can send you this on Skype here. And so in the way the video works is it's like him and this kid on the boardwalk, and you essentially have the vision that DW has in this episode, in that like everybody on the boardwalk, you can see how much money they have like floating over their heads. Mm-hmm. And so it gives you a whole new perspective of like, oh, like you kind of sized up this person one way, and then you realize, oh, the person that person who looks like they're better off, they're actually $200 in debt. So it reminded me of this music video, which is a pretty unique music video.
I'll check it out. So DW immediately like doesn't feel well. She feels sick to her stomach, and she gets to spend the day at home. While she's there, she is again obsessing over allowances and asks Arthur and his friends what they make for allowances, and they're just like, huh, you know what? I never thought about asking. It's like never come up. And DW's like, is everybody besides me crazy? But then that leads to the poisonous question of how much do you make for allowance? And we don't see them talking about it, but we see them exploding out of the living room with Francine saying things like, consider this the end of our friendship. Which
DW has, opened the Arthur gang's eyes to Marxist theory. And now they understand, the reality of the class struggle and the violent dominance of capital being thrust upon them. They now have to reckon with how things truly are. They've had their eyes opened.
Well, and I think that they were doomed from the start asking this question because Muffy's in the room. So of course she gets something outrageous.
Oh, no.
Why they even thought to ask, I'll never know. So DW eventually gets the idea that it doesn't matter if she has the most allowance. It matters if she acts like she has the most allowance.
Which is, 100% true. DW right here, she's like a she's like a SoundCloud rapper, putting the money phone to her ear. Truly, all that matters, the only currency that matters is clout and Flexin. You know what I mean? It's how much drip do you got? You know, that's the currency that's important. So we get this amazing sequence.
DW goes from like straight up flexing to like gram flexing here.
Oh yeah. DW is just, she's a clout queen at this point. She is just flexing on him. I don't think we've seen an Arthur character flex this hard yet in the show. I think this is the most prime example of flexing we've seen in Arthur.
Yeah, so DW comes to preschool, and she like has these sunglasses on. She has this like tiara on with like jewels in it, and she has her Mary Moo Cow phone in her backpack that she's pretending is like a kind of like a cell phone or a landline or something. And just pretending that she has all this money. She's using play money to like fool everybody into thinking she's super rich. Like she flashes a couple of bills at the Tibbles and asks them for a pillow. And like it's a great thing. Like she picks up the phone and like talks in this fake language and then pretends it's just like that was my like offshore bank account or whatever it is. And the Tibbles are like, wow, I didn't know DW was a princess. But then it turns out that like Mrs. What
Oh yeah,
preschool teacher's name?
Their preschool teacher blows up DW's spot. You know what I mean?
Big time.
She
expose her.
Oh,
expose her.
DW's been straight embarrassed. This is like DW's oh god, what's his name? Lil Bow Wow. This is DW's Lil Bow Wow moment where it's like, oh, you thought he had all this cash, and here he is flying economy class on the airplane. Lil Bow Wow like took a picture of another private jet that was docked in the airport, only to then be spotted in economy class in like a regular plane. So DW truly exposed as the scammer she is. She out here scamming.
And she drops her phone, and it's just her Mary Moo Cow phone, and she like actually breaks down here because she's just like, just because I don't have as much money as you doesn't mean that you like that I'm not as good as you. Just like, don't hate me because I don't have as much money as you. It's really not a good look for DW. It does not make her sympathetic at all. In fact, Emily kind of takes notice of this.
I felt the way Emily felt in this moment, where I was like, oh, I felt bad that DW got exposed. Like it's not so much that, like in this moment, I feel less like she just wants the things, to have the things, which is how she kind of was portrayed earlier in the episode. In this moment, when she's like, don't hate me because I don't have as much money, I think she truly thinks that she'll be ostracized, or that the other kids will look down upon her because she doesn't have the same things as them. And I think that's totally, I sympathize with DW in this moment, seeing her lie be exposed.
I don't disagree, but I think for me it's less sympathy and it's more pity. Just like DW going to all these harsh extremes to kind of put herself above everybody, and then she kind of gets put back in her place. And it's too bad that her obsession with things being equal and like wealth and everything has brought her to this. But it's also like, yeah, you kind of get what you ask for here. But it turns out Emily is kind of a saint, of just because all she really wants to do, she's never cared about the money or anything like that. It's been DW who's been obsessing over it. So she says, DW, if I give you some of my allowance and we're equal, can we be friends again? And it's a very little kid thing. It's just like, Emily's like, I don't understand why you're being like this, but if I try and make things better, like if I just take away from myself to make you feel better, can we just play together again? And DW initially accepts it, but then decides to give her allowance back to her, and just like no, that's okay, you don't have to do that. And so there's a little bit of a redemptive thing there.
See, what's happening here is this is classic Reaganism trickle-down economics, okay? What we really need to do is redistribute the wealth around the preschool to truly make everyone equal. What's going on here is like, oh, Emily will give DW the table scraps, and the richer Emily gets, it'll bring up all the other students because she'll choose out of the kindness of her heart to pass it along. I say, Emily gets the guillotine, you know what I mean? We're in revolution, baby!
She's the first against the wall when the revolution comes?
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
No, the first against the wall when the revolution comes is
Marie-Hélène?
Marie-Hélène.
And then the episode actually ends with just a quick little gag of DW calling Grandma Thora and like trying to basically bilk her for money, and but Mom finding out right away. So that's it for this episode of Arthur. Let's rewind back and talk about The Boy with His Head in the Clouds. Lucas, what did you make of this episode?
So I really like The Boy with His Head in the Clouds. It's again, I think this is an episode where I uniquely relate to it, and I was really pleased to see how accurately the dyslexia was portrayed by the episode. It was in a really realistic manner, especially like watching like George take his classes or hearing them tell George about, the other people that have dyslexia. I was like, oh my goodness, this speaks so much to my personal experience. As also seeing the way George's mind works. It was really kind of uncanny to how similar it is that I think about things sometimes. And so I thought it was really well done in that sense, and I loved like the hammer stuff. That stuff is hilarious, and the fact that they went to the trouble of making an extra song for it is really good. That being said, I definitely think this is in my top 5 for the season thus far, but I think it's on the lower end of my top 5. Like it's not laugh out loud funny per se, and I don't think it's like exceptional, but I think it's a really unique episode. It's a George episode, and it's an episode I really relate to, so I can't help but recommend it. I just don't think it's one of the best of the season. I'd go as far as to say it's one of the best of the season, but I don't think it's the best of the season.
Yeah, I think that it's not so much for me. It's not like a standout episode, but it's a standout vehicle for a character I'm really interested to explore more. It's like how I feel like I said probably a similar thing for like the first Fern-centric episode, where it's like it doesn't have to be the best episode in the world as long as we establish who this character is, and we can kind of inform them going forward. I really like when we give more characters the spotlight, and I was really happy to see George be part of it. Like, he's been such a bit player and basically a non-character for so long that it's good to see him here, and I think that the spin with having him be dyslexic and but also like having that be a means to illustrate his character, I felt was very, very effective. The episode itself was kind of like not really anything to me, but I appreciated what it's there for, and I do like the character of George quite a bit. And there were some really nice touches in there, like the hammer sequence and everything. I thought that was very, very good. So yeah, not the greatest episode, but man, I really liked what they were able to do, and I'm excited for things going forward. For more, I thought this one had some good parts to it. Like, I think a lot of the scenes where like DW is full on like in flexing mode. I mean, take a drink every time that we've said flex in this episode, but I think those are really funny and also very true to life for a little kid. I thought that this was the most like a realistic little girl DW has been in a while. And that can kind of go both ways. It's just like, I appreciate the realism, but it also doesn't make her a super likable character. But it's also kind of not supposed to. So I understand what it's doing there. Overall, I don't have really too much like strong feelings about this episode. I don't dislike it, but I also don't really love it or anything. I think it was an interesting thing to explore. I like that Emily got a little bit more characterization. She seems pretty nice, and like she just wants to be DW's friend, which I think is cool. And you know, some of the parts of the episode I thought were pretty funny or fun, but other than that, it's like kind of washed over me.
Yeah, it's a weird episode. Again, I find I usually have more patience for DW than her detractors. But there were moments in this episode where I was almost on my last nerve with her, specifically in the first half of the episode when she's like wanting a French nanny. But I do think it does a good job of sort of as an adult viewing this, making us understand that, of course, DW doesn't really understand why, you know, the other kids have this stuff and she doesn't have this stuff. And another thing that's interesting about it is that it's a DW-centric episode where there's not actually that much interaction with the other kids. Like, there's two scenes. There's basically the one on the sandbox where the kids show her the checkbook and stuff, and then there's the big flexing scene at the end. But the rest of the episode is majority, like, DW's inner monologue, which I thought was interesting. But, yeah, I think I agree with you, with the exception of the flexing sequence, which is incredibly hilarious, and also like Buster and his friends all ceasing to become friends anymore because they never considered that they get different allowances. I think it's a fairly middle of the road episode, and maybe even stands to be a little bit more of an annoying DW episode than other ones. But depending on how much patience you have with DW's more off-putting behavior, I think this is a fine DW episode in its own right.
I've seen better, but I've seen worse. So I think it's, you know, it's okay if we don't have particularly strong feelings at this point in the show. Like, it's okay. So, you know, I still don't feel like I wasted my time watching this, of course. So yeah, there you go. That's another episode of Arthur in the Books. You know, Lucas, we set it off, Mike. We're getting pretty close to episode 100.
That's right. Episode 100 of Elwood City Limits is coming up, which is insane. Could you imagine, like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when we started doing this, that we'd have 100 episodes of this podcast?
Yeah, no, there's a lot has happened in the last 3 years that we've been doing this. And a lot is going to continue to happen. We're going to have to figure this out a little bit. We'll have to talk about this off. We'll have to talk about this off the air. But, well, everybody, in case you weren't aware, I mean, I'm going to be getting married next month. In fact, as of Wednesday the 13th, it is 30 days until I get married. So
I RSVP'd. I don't know if you saw my email.
I did. We did. So we really appreciate it. Can't wait to have you there. We'll have to take a special wedding selfie. Well, I'm sure there'll be a lot of those that night. But yeah, April is going to be a crazy month. We're going to have to figure out the schedule for that exactly. Since I'll be getting married, going on my honeymoon, I've got and WrestleMania's that month. Big things popping, little things stopping.
I'll be starting my work term.
It's going to be very busy for the both of us, so we will keep you abreast of how we're going to be tackling that as soon as we figure that out. But in the meantime, we've got a couple of weeks before all of that stuff touches down. So we continue on with Elwood City Limits. It's been nice to have a little bit of a streak here. We'll see if we can keep that going into the next episode. It's going to be Rhyme for Your Life and For Whom the Bell Tolls.
Oh my goodness, the Metallica Arthur episode is coming up.
We're gonna ride the lightning and figure out what that's all about. So until the next time, it's actually starting to warm up a little bit around here. So hopefully not too much more complaining about the winter weather. As by next week, in fact, once Jordan Peele's Us hits theaters, we'll be into spring. I can't think of a better way to kick off a season than a new Jordan Peele movie. All right, so my name's Will Young. Thank you for listening to Elwood City Limits. We are so glad to have you here week after week or time after time. And for Lucas Mancini,
free money?
that was a big wind-up.
Because I had closed the Word document.
All right, we'll see you next time. Have a good week, everybody.